Welcome to The Next Journey, the adventure travel podcast with me, Andrew St Pierre White. I'm a prisoner of this. It's not critical. I look better than you, lighting-wise.
You do, yeah.
And
that bit darker.
I just want to emphasize it's just the lighting that looks better on my side than you.
That's good. At least we've got some good fun.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Next Journey Podcast. My special guest today is Paul Marsh. Many of you will know Paul from the work on the channel, our trips together, and of course, our co-production collaboration on the Overland workshop. Hello, Paul from Cape Town. How are you?
Hello, Andrew. Hello, and how is everyone? It's lovely to connect with you all the way from Cape Town. And we've got a cool, cloudy day here, much like your weather in Perth, I'd imagine.
Actually, you've got a sunny day.
Haven't had the rain.
Sunny day today in Perth. Yeah. Yes, actually, summer's arriving. Tomorrow it's going to be 34. So Perth is typical. Wow. You know, it's a bit cold, and suddenly, summer's here. Crikey. It's like a one day.
Now, we've just had some very hectic rains for those of you who followed on in news around Cape Town. And Cape Town does tend to hit the headlines. And I love living here, I must say. It's a beautiful part of the world, and you know it well. But certainly the rains have come through last weekend, 300 millimeters, 50 road closures, and really snarled up traffic. So it's why we live in Africa. You know, Africa just has this amazing ability to throw out a curved ball every now and then, and you deal with it. And it's much like I like to live my life. You make a plan.
I was recently looking at footage and some of the shows that we made together in 2019 when we built the 105 Land Cruiser. And I was sitting at Cape Town International Airport, and it was raining, but it was the first rain that the city had for such a long time. In fact, you were within 1 week of literally running out of water. It was one of the few large cities in the world to actually be in that situation, and you got rain literally within a week of running out. And while I was there, and it was just raining, and everybody was so happy, but it was just raining and raining and raining and miserable, and it was fantastic because everybody, big sigh of relief.
You know, Cape Town's an amazing city, and South Africa, as you know, grew up in South Africa, lived in England, a brief stint in Australia, and chose to come back and live in Cape Town, having grown up in Johannesburg. And it's such an eclectic mix of cultures here. You know, you've got the Cape Coloureds, you've got the local African, you've got the whites, you've got the international people who mix in. And it's a great, I would say, ability for people to really mix and pull together, and a lot of fun. I mean, I think there's a culture in Cape Town which people really do get out and have some fun. People have a lot to explore. I mean, it's one of the beautiful cities in the world where you can get on the mountain within 10 minutes of being in and around Cape Town. You can drive out for an hour and be in beautiful mountain passes. You can go and explore the wilderness in a 4-wheel drive or a bicycle. So for me, coming back to Cape Town, which was probably almost 10 years ago, was a really good chapter in my life. I'm loving living.
Yeah. Cape Town is, of all of the places in South Africa, Cape Town is, you have to go and see Cape Town. It is a wonderfully beautiful city. Yeah, as you say, lots to do. And it's just, Cape Town's special. It definitely is. No question about it.
So that's really just a good punt for people to come and explore Cape Town.
So before we get going, I'm going to do a little message from the sponsors of our podcast, and then we're going to talk about. I think we're going to talk firstly about our Africa troop carrier build. We're going to talk a little bit about that because some stuff has happened very, very recently, and those videos have not yet been released. And I'm getting so excited. I'm tingling seeing the progress on the car. And the other thing I want to talk to you about is that the other side of Paul Marsh that people don't know about, and that is your experience with long distance vintage car rallies that you support and heavily involved in. And I actually want to talk about that and hopefully get some nice anecdotal stories from you. You ready?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Let me just thank our sponsors this week. It's Zippo. Did you know that Zippo don't just make those lovely little lighters? They also make inserts that allow you to convert a traditional Zippo lighter into a small butane burner. So if you thought the Zippo was pretty good at withstanding a wind for lighting a campfire, lighting a camp stove. I mean, I've always loved the Zippos in that they're kind of solid and they're slightly cold in the hand, and everything is very tactile about them. They're a lovely kind of almost ritualistic way of starting a fire. The butane burners now, even in a Cape Town southeaster, you can still light your campfire. So
that's testimony to a great product.
So if you look in the video description, I will post the Zippo website where you can get some of this kit for yourself. So it's a very, very nice kit. They also have some nice firelighters. They make firelighters, but they make it out of natural pine, which is coated in a kind of a paraffin, like a paraffin wax. Brilliant little firelighters. Really, really good. And they're not, again, they're quite tactile and they're quite nice to use. So thank you to Zippo for sponsoring the Next Journey. Paul, give me some, what do you think of the color, the new cruiser?
Well, the color is something spectacular. And of course, that it's a favorite color of mine. It's got a great history to it. It's, it's my favorite color. What can I say? I think you chose well. It looks stunning, by the way. The number of people, and of course, I've been driving your troopy around, snagging and checking it, and the number of heads it turns, and people looking at it and going, oh my God, that's beautiful.
And it doesn't have the bar work on yet. It hasn't got the wheels on yet. It hasn't got the wheel arch flare stone guards on it. It hasn't got the mud flaps on it. It hasn't got a rear bumper on it. And it's still turning heads.
When you show people, when I show clients a brand new troopy and then you put it next to one that we've completely built, because one of our specialized vehicles that I build for clients is the troopy. And, you put it next to each other and you can't recognize the vehicle. I mean, once it's got its roof on and it's got a rack on or a roof tent, as we're doing on yours, or it's got a cut-off pop-up roof, the bumpers, the wider wheels, it's a different truck completely. And then if you go and paint it to be unique and stand out, it changes it even more. So, it's coming on nicely. I think I'm sure you're going to be very keen to come and see your vehicle, but you have to wait. It's not finished yet. It's going to be a while.
I'm going to be there late April next year and to do a major trip in it. But I keep going, actually finding myself actually coming back into my office and like, what's that video Paul sent me? And just kind of look at it and say, look at it. And I noticed you'd cut the holes for the water orifices, for the water fillers. You did that before the...
So we try and do all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the prep work we could do before it got painted was really important.
Inside those water tanks, which I haven't told anybody about, those water tanks that actually fit on the inside, but they're actually on the inside the panel. So you cut away the panels, and you've done all that now. So I've been going through it frame by frame, having a look at my car. It's very exciting. It really is such fun.
Yeah, and it's nice to see it grow from the ground up. It's like watching a house. You put the foundations down and you build your home.
Yeah.
What you're seeing a vehicle that we bought that wasn't pretty, it wasn't rough, but it was certainly tired. And you see the work the guys did to bring it back to life. I mean, that vehicle is so beautifully prepared and painted. You said it yourself, you haven't seen the vehicle painted. So, from the photographs and videos, it is beautifully done. So testament to the guys, Jason and his team, they did
a really good job. And I'm looking some of the footage that was that Steph got from me. There's so little corrosion in that car, almost none.
And you don't realize how that is a car to buy. I mean, most people would have been put off by the mileage, 500,000 kilometers. I promise you, we were so fortunate. We looked hard, but at the same time, it was a really good buy. It really was. The vehicle, having lived its life up in Johannesburg, corrosion wasn't going to be a big problem. Accident damage maybe, and whatever people have abused and that. But the integrity of the chassis and the actual body of the car was good. The minor accident damage we found was very small and well repaired, should I say. So to repaint a car like that and then rebuild all the mechanical stuff that Sneemans have done with the axles and the gearbox, everything has been redone. I mean, besides rebuilding the engine, it has absolutely transformed the vehicle into, you do another serious lifetime with that vehicle.
Oh, easily another 100, half a mil again, easily.
Well, it's like anything. I think you can get mileage out of cars like this if you look after it. I mean, I had some Toyotas in the time I've been in South Africa that have clocked over 1,000,000 kilometers. And you don't believe it, but it's just people take care of their vehicles and they look after it. And, 1,000,000 kilometers, and you think, wow. You take it to Toyota and they go, well, what's the problem? We kind of expect that if you look after it. It's like, so yeah, it's a great testament to see that. Good to see.
Very, very exciting. So those videos, for those of you who follow the channel, those videos will be coming out towards the end of October, where we're going to finish my solo trip through the Outback. Then we're going to do a little bit on the US, Gwen and I's last trip on the US. I think that's 2 videos, it might be 3. And then we're getting back into the South African Troop Carrier series with our discussion that we had when I was there about the interior. Then a lot of the interior we shot while I was there. I want to parallel that with, as you're actually building my vehicle, I'm going to cut back to our discussion and kind of through, then and now. And I think that's going to be an exciting
process. It's going to be great. And we've not only, everything we do on the Troopy, we enhance the design. So little tweaks have been made. We've now designed a beautiful rear step. Skulker's a really talented engineer, and so the rear step is really nice. We've had our prototypes and that. And the little changes that we upgrade. So the whole idea was, as you know, was to put a system out there that we really have taken 30 years of my experience of building trucks, put in all the ideas, together with a brilliant engineer, together with about 12 that we've built, feedback from clients. So right now we've got a Troopy that I think is world-class in what we put out there for an overland truck to drive globally, really. So yeah, I'm looking forward to you driving it. It is going to be the best Troopy you've ever owned. We committed to that, so you're just going to come and drive.
You've got to be the best I've ever owned. You've got somewhere to go, because I'm in love with my grey Troop Carrier, I must tell you. But the interior, I think, yours is better. I think yours is better interior. But anyway.
For another time, we'll leave that.
We'll argue when we see each other. We'll argue, and we're going to talk about also do a short trip together or something. It would be good.
Yeah, we'll definitely.
I know.
Well, my truck's the same color, so we have to do a trip together.
Well, I think that the channel would love to have a good look at your 80 series. Really, they would. Yeah, so, definitely. Knowing how mechanic's vehicle is always the one that breaks down, because they never work on their own vehicle. They always learn on other people's vehicles. And I think it might be the same with you, because you've had your 80 in Cape Town forever, and you've hardly driven it at all, because you're spending all the time building other cars, and then you neglect your own until you did the paint job, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I took my Troopy. So my Troopy my 80 series was bought in England. And I prototyped it for many of the build work and some of the products we designed in England. And then I took it to Australia when I moved there. Then I brought it back to South Africa. Then I took it to Southeast Asia on a rally around Southeast Asia for almost a month. Then I brought it back, and then it stood. And that's where the point we decided, right, we're going to paint it. We're going to do the whole interior. And then we designed a full-on interior for it with all laser cut, designed our own water tanks, everything, to really give the 80 series a world-class feel. And I basically looked and thought, what did I want? What do I feel I'd want in my truck? And of course, it's always subject to opinions and what people really want. But I'm very happy with the outcome, and it's not quite finished yet. It will be finished by the time you and I do our trip. And you're so right. My truck sits on the back burner for most of the time, and Jo nudges me to get work done it because she wants to go and drive it.
Yeah, listen to her. She's the one who's going to manage the timetable. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely right.
So that's part of my passion. Like you, my real passion is actually flying, and you're much the same. But my life's work has been around four-wheel drives. In my early days, I did engineering, and then I went into my own business in the motor trade, and I trained as a mechanical technician as well. And of course, the early days in South Africa, we worked on cars which are now classic cars, and many of the cars that we go on in these big rallies are classic, some vintage cars, some veteran cars, but mostly classic cars. So it's very interesting, I guess, to share with you the start of the whole journey for me on the classic car rallies was when I moved to England. I moved to England in 1997, and the idea was then to go across to England with my former wife, Nikki, to go and get passports. And we had British ancestry. We could go there, live there for a few years. She's a medical doctor, and the two of us decided to head across to the UK and start up a life in the UK, which I thoroughly enjoyed for 18 years, and thereafter moved to Australia and then back to South Africa. But the reality of the whole journey was once I got to the UK, I saw a little advert. No, let's go back a step. Once I'd got to the UK there, a friend of mine who owns Easy On, Jack Stuller, Jack drove up through Africa. He drove his troopy up through Africa. After elections in 95, everything opened up because we just finished a trip driving through Africa. We spent 1.5 years exploring Africa, right up through East Africa, all the way up to Sudan and back down again. And that sort of set the stage for us to come across to the UK and carry on with the work we wanted to do. But not the classic car story really came about when Jack arrived on my doorstep and said to me, "Paul, I want to sell my troopy." So we put an ad in the local magazines and that, and a guy phoned me up called Terence. And Terence English called me up and he said to me, "Paul, I want to buy this car." And he was happy enough. He was told me about a rally. He was going to drive through Africa from London to Cape Town with 80 vehicles, a mix of 4x4 classic cars and all the vintage cars as well. So that's quite a challenge to take 80 vehicles from London to Cape Town. So I got very interested in the whole story. That night I went and Googled this whole rally, and I understood that it wasn't just Terence, it was Sir Terence. And so I told him he needed to come up and have a look at the vehicle. He couldn't buy it from me over the phone. He needed to come and look at it. So at that time I was living on a farm just outside Peterborough. Terence arrived. Of course, I had to ask him what a Sir is, and to my ignorance, he explained that he's a very significant heart surgeon in a very, how would I say, polite way, and he did the first heart transplant in England.
Right.
So Terence and I became more than just friends. He's like a father to me. Very significant man in my life. Anyway, the long and the short was he went back to the rally organization and said, "You need to get young Paul Marsh to come to the meeting," which was, I think, about 3 weeks before departure, "and tell you a bit about Africa. He's just driven the whole route." So I went along, 80 odd people, actually more than 80, it's probably 160 if you took the partners, sitting there, and I stood up to talk about Africa and what you to expect and what the roads are like and how they were going to destroy some of their beautiful cars on those roads. And Terence had opted not to take his Bentley. He had a Rolls and he had an old Bentley, and he's decided that he'd rather take the Cruiser. So he got me involved into classic car rallies. At lunchtime, the owner of the organization, Ron Brown from Hero Rally Organization, came up to me and said, "What will it take for you to be on my rally?" I said a very nice word to my wife. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay." And I said, "There's only one condition." There was a doctor involved, and he was from South Africa. He was the chief medical officer. So Dr. Mark Human, he and I met at that lunch. What I didn't realize that he and Nikki, my ex-wife, had trained together in South Africa. So he was the chief medical officer for the rally. So I said, "There's only one condition. The two South Africans drive in the vehicle at the back." And we set up different crews on the rally. We had doctor, mechanic in 2 vehicles and 1 paramedic and a mechanic. So we had 3 support vehicles for 80 vehicles. Now you must think about that, 3 support vehicles for 80 vehicles. The enormity of what
80,
can go
did you
wrong.
say 80?
80.
Wow, okay.
No, it's daunting. I mean, when you set off and you leave London and you drive across the channel and you took the train and across Europe, all the way down, right the way through into Israel, through into Egypt, all the way down. And then we got to Egypt, we used the Russian Antonov. big heavy lift aircraft. And that plane was used to fly the vehicles across some of the areas we couldn't drive across very easily. And we flew into Entebbe in Uganda. So again, 80 vehicles on an aircraft. You put 40 and 40, so 40 vehicles on an aircraft. Think about the logistics. And if it didn't make it difficult at that point, when you get into Egypt, they issue you number plates, special number plates onto each car. You get a set of number plates. And when you leave, you have to give them back. It's like a way of controlling the cars in and out. And of course, we got the number plates issued to every car. What happened? Half the people wanted to keep them as souvenirs. So now the Russian Antonov has got to be loaded at about 2, 3 in the morning. It's got to take off before sunrise. That's around 4 a.m. So the air is more dense. And it can get off with this heavy weight into the skies and fly across to Uganda. Now I've got to go and wake up people, fast asleep, get them to ruffle through their luggage, give me back the number plates before we can load the vehicles onto the planes. So that rally was probably one of the most interesting, fun. We had a good mix of young and old people. The crew were phenomenal. We worked really hard. You'd often be working late into the night, sometimes through the night, trying to fix cars and sort cars. Your vehicles, the vehicles that we carried, which were fully kitted with medical equipment, stretchers, you can imagine what medical kit the doctors put in. Then the mechanics put their kit in, and all the bits and pieces to repair a car. So, coming from South Africa, we've had to fix things all our lives. You didn't just buy a new thing, you had to fix it. And I love as a kid pulling stuff together and fixing it. The stories what I used to do. In fact, besides building model aeroplanes and pulling my mother's washing machines apart and the lawnmower apart, when I left home, I unpacked a small hobby room that I had. And I said to my dad, I pulled out a little plastic bag, and it had a clock in it. And I gave it to him and I said, I could never put this back together. And he just shook his head and he said, my God, there's one thing. I didn't think you'd get that right. But at the same time, that was my life. I used to pull stuff, anything that mechanical I could pull apart and fix it or look at it. And I wanted to know how stuff worked. That stood me in great stead over the years to be on the side of the road with not much at your disposal and making a plan. And that means you cutting up Coke cans, taking wire from fences, bits off other cars to make things work. You've got to make a plan to get a car fixed.
So I want to go a little bit deeper on that in terms of what broke and that kind of thing, but just step back just a little bit. What is typical of the car? Are those 80 cars? What year was that? And what typically was the kind of car that people were driving?
So the pre-wars, I can't remember all of them, but they'd be early turn of the century. We had some pre-war and some post-war. We had a La France Simplex.
Wow.
I can't tell you the exact date, but it's an old chain-driven vehicle. That, for me, the guys who drove it worked on it, and I had huge respect for them, 2 Dutch guys. And that vehicle drove. It was an old fire engine to start out, and it drove all the way through on the route through Africa. Incredible. I was blown away at that. And I must say it was something truly inspirational to see how people pull together when things go wrong. As much as you've got the mechanical crew, a lot of the people are very hands-on in their own cars. When things go wrong, people all muck in to help. So you get those pre-war cars, you get some post-war, and then your classics. Classics traditionally are 30-odd years old. So, as it grows on, your classics, keep changing. But your early classic cars were probably what we grew up with now, 30-odd years ago. So those are the cars, the Mercs and the Porsches and Bentleys and Healeys and Aston Martins. And, they're all cars. Some of them are 30, 40 years, 50 years old. And beautifully, some of them have been really well restored. And many of them had been properly prepared and some not. And that was the hard part, because the rally organizer would put it out to everyone to come and join the rally. Some people had experience, so they knew what to do and how to prepare their cars. Now the biggest challenge with these cars is you're carrying more weight than you should. And that's what generally breaks the cars, is the weight. The roads, yeah, bad roads. Those cars were designed to go over those bad roads. I mean, the old Bentleys, the early Bentleys, they're brilliant. They're built very strong. They can handle the roads. But what they can't handle is the excessive weight that people put in the cars. And so, all the weak points start showing up on cars. Bad roads and lots of weight on a car. It's a recipe to really pull a car apart and break it up. And of course, then you add in controlled sections. So they have speed trials and that in different sections. So, you've got a whole different stages, which is quite technical, and the guys drive and they've got to follow certain speeds to get through these in certain times and certain checkpoints. And that adds another dimension to it. So the whole crew that organizes this rally is not just about the logistics of all the hotels and making sure that happens, which in itself is an enormity. It's closing off roads. It's making sure that when you come into certain cities, you've got people opening roads for you. You've got place to park all these cars. You've got security. You've got places to work. And most evenings, you work on the cars where you park them. So 5-star hotels, wherever you're staying, become mechanical workshops in their basements and parking lots, because that's where everyone's fixing their cars. But it's just fascinating to see the camaraderie. And, it's overlanding in a different way. And I think much as though these people would stay in quite nice places every night, the challenge of driving those old cars was really a testimony to the driver, the perseverance, the dedication. And, things go wrong in big ways and quite often some very big accidents. And that's always tragic when that happens. We've had fatalities on rallies. We've, had to deal with that. We've had big accidents where cars are no longer drivable. You put them on trucks, you truck them ahead for a few days till you get parts. And you either fly parts in or you manufacture parts. You fix it, you make a plan. So it's actually probably more challenging and more exciting than all the overland travel, where you can prepare yourself. You've got a pretty robust 4x4. It's not really going to break. But you get a classic car and the guys rip the exhaust off, or the fuel's a problem. I mean, I had once we were coming through Laos from, we did another rally from London to Sydney, which was an epic trip. I have to say, it was probably one of my favorite rallies. So I've rallied across every continent. South America was a big one. We'll talk about that because that was significant. But London to Sydney was a much smaller group. There were about 20 odd vehicles. There were 4 of us who put the whole rally together. I was approached after South America because I wanted to stop these massive big rallies after South America. And the guy approached me and said, listen, how about 4 of us, medical, mechanical, route planning and logistics, and we're going to drive to Sydney. And I said, right, we're up for it. So we set up a company called Global Rally Organization, headed up by a guy called Rick Dyke Price. And Rick is an amazing guy. He was just so good at leading the group, very thorough in his preparation. He did all the logistics, the organizing, the hotel bookings. Stuart, his very good friend, Stuart Onyet, did the entire route plan. Now, if I have to tell you, you're taking 20 odd vehicles from London to Sydney, and you've never driven 1 kilometer of the route. There isn't another rally organization would do that. Every rally organization pre-drives the route, pre-checks it out, puts the route books together, and then hosts the rally. Well, we didn't do that. For one, it was going to be very expensive to pre-drive it. We were doing it at cost to everyone involved. And we weren't making profit out of this. This was basically cover costs with a group of friends. So the group of friends were all keen. I changed the format in that rally that every vehicle had to come to my workshop in England. And I scrutinized every vehicle 3 months before. So I had a very clear idea of what needed to be done to the car, or what was going to break. So from the previous rallies that I'd done through Africa and around South America, I saw so many problems that taught me a lot about what did break, what didn't break, where we could improve things, how we could better things. So when it came London to Sydney, we made everyone do first aid courses. We made everyone carry certain equipment. The spares, the heavy stuff, were put in the 4-wheel drive, so the cars were kept much lighter. We pre-scrutinized every car 3 months before, so I could then give them a full list of modifications, things to strengthen, bits to carry. They had to carry the basic spares in their car, the roadside spares, fuel filters and points and condenser and stuff like that, that if there was a problem, we could fix it quickly. And that put everyone in great preparation. And I remember driving out of Marble Arch, from under Marble Arch in London, and I was driving my Discovery at the time that I had, and thinking, we're going to drive all the way to Sydney. It's a daunting thought. You're looking and thinking we're going to drive, across out of the UK, across in the tunnel, across into Europe, right through Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, drive across the Karakoram Highway at that time, up through Western China, where there were no roads. They were making roads at the time. So these classic cars, some of them open top Jaguars and that, some of them refusing to put their roofs up because it didn't make much difference, the dust still came in, were driving across these dirt roads in Western China. And at that time, there were no maps with English signs on it. You got a Chinese map with a route drawn on it. So when you got lost, and we did, because we didn't drive in one trail, you made your way. And me being at the back, if I stopped for a repair, I would be often behind the whole rally, and I'd have to rely on my map and finding my way. So we'd get lost, and then you'd have to stop off somewhere, and you'd have to go and ask. The older people couldn't speak much English, but the kids were pretty good with a couple of words. But if you showed them the map, they could read it, and they'd point you generally in the right direction, or the police would find you, and the military would find you, and they'd put you back on course, and off you'd go. And we drove right across China. And we then made our way down south and into Laos. In some of those routes, we hit big landslides. One night we slept on the mountain. There was a landslide and we couldn't get through, so we all slept in the cars. We had no choice. So we carried emergency food and we carried warm sleeping bags because we prepared for this. We knew that this may happen, and it did. I can remember the one, we had an E-Type Jag. I mean, probably one of the most unsuitable cars, but it was a beautiful car. And this guy loved his car, Colin. But my God, did we work hard on that car to keep it on the road. And the one day, what would happen in the evenings, the cars would all arrive at the hotel. And generally I would come in last, and the guy who's got a beer waiting for me would probably be the first person and say, "Hey, Paul, come, I've got a beer for you. Come and fix my car." I just had to be sure there weren't too many cars to fix, so I wouldn't get through all the beers. But that's what would happen. I'd literally arrive in and I'd start working on the cars. And sometimes I ate my dinner on the bonnet or whatever, and you fix the cars until they're fixed. And, you make a plan, you pull parts out. And with the one Healy we rode, the gearbox was a problem. So we pulled the gearbox out. We had to put it on a truck, but not a conventional truck where you've got, a nice low loader. No, this is a normal truck. So reverse it up to a heap of sand and a couple of planks and push the car on it and tie it on, and off he drives, and, we'll pick him up further down the road. And at one stage we towed one of the vehicles along the Afghan border for, I don't know, the whole night. We towed him behind my Discovery. The whole night we just towed him until we got to the next place. And then there was one of the guys flying in, and I said, "You're going to fly in with a gearbox." So he literally convinced the airlines to put a gearbox in his luggage in the plane and bring it to us. And other times, we'd get to a place and the local workshops were great, and the local car clubs would help. And it's the one thing about classic cars, when you put it out there, you get a lot of help. In Iran, the Prime Minister wanted to have tea with us, so we all went and had tea with him. And so, we got some incredible opportunities to enjoy, and we see the planning of the route was to take in some of the most spectacular scenes, go into China and go to Chengdu and go and see the pandas, and, make your way through. So you don't drive just a route to see it. So we took out the competitive element completely, and it became an adventure drive. And that's what we changed massively. So the adventure drive was now to explore, to see, to experience, to meet the people. Iran was fascinating.
Before we get into Iran, I want to hear that, but just give me I remember once you mentioning that E-Type Jag and what you had to do that night. And you had,
Yes.
I remember this vaguely. Share that story with us because
Oh,
it sounded ridiculous, but please share it with us.
it was crazy. So the E-Type gave us probably the most headaches on that rally. The car was quite low at the front, and I'd had an aluminium skid plate in the front, and that from all the bumps and everything he had to eventually had to strengthen it up with steel, and he cracked his sump, which is a cast alloy sump. So now we're in China, and I've got a crack in this aluminium sump. It's not a case of putting something in to fix it. It's take the whole engine out, take the bonnet off, take the whole engine out, take the sump off. Now this is happening at night. Find a workshop that's going to stay open, and they're going to weld that up for us to put it all back together before the morning.
You can find somebody to weld aluminium, a cast aluminium item in the middle of, where were you at the time?
I was a small town somewhere.
Which country?
It had some big
which
workshop.
Country?
Oh, I can't tell you. It was sort of somewhere along in the western side of China.
Okay. China. China's enough. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. But that was one great how would I say event where we had a lot of help. I mean, it wasn't just me. I had a great bunch of guys. We had a lot of fun doing it. We worked really hard to get it fixed. We got it sorted. It wasn't difficult. It was just a case of pull it out and put it back in and make it all work. But one that was really interesting, we had a lovely Mercedes on the trip, and he came around the corner and he smashed into the back of a truck. And of course, now this was a problem because the vehicle was going to go into Australia. And I don't have to tell you how strict they are to get the vehicles in. But this was going to compromise possibly getting it into Australia. So we had a couple of rest days in one of the small towns. And I found a workshop where these guys did panel beating. Now, these guys can panel beat, let me tell you. They don't just replace parts, they straighten them. So I went to the guy, and of course, you can't speak English. So you either work for an interpreter if he's there, or it's sign language, or you're using Google Translate where you can, if there's a computer around, or you draw stuff, and you can really make things happen. It's great to communicate with mechanics who don't speak English. You all understand the same language. You're fixing a car. It's kind of not obvious. It's quite obvious, but it's great fun. With this particular car, the whole bonnet was smashed up, the radiator, the headlights, the fenders. And I looked at the guy and I said, "Can you fix it?" And he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, no problem," obviously in Chinese. And I said, "No, but I needed painting." And then he looked at me and kind of like frowned, and there's like a long debate, long pregnant silence. It's like, is this going to happen? I can't have a straight car and not painted. And he looked and he agreed. They worked 24 hours a day for the 2.5 days to rebuild the front of that car. Every part was straightened. The chrome on the grills, the little beads were straightened. The headlights they couldn't replace, we put Toyota headlights in. We fitted a radiator out of another car that we made fit. It was incredible to see, but actually when you closed the bonnet and you looked at it, you wouldn't tell the difference. It was these double headlights in the front work. It was incredible. When he gave us the bill, I added on a heap of money just to give him, because it was just incredible for what he did. His whole team just worked. I think there were 10 or 12 of them. They didn't stop. They just kept working, taking shifts and working. I mean, that you'd never get anywhere in the world, never. And these guys were just so dedicated to, and how proud they were when they were finished to have done this. And we could get across, and finish and get the car all the way through to Singapore. So we drove all the way to Singapore. And then from Singapore, we spent 3 days cleaning the cars. We shipped them into Darwin. Now, there's always this big thing, when you take your car into Australia, will they accept it? Won't they accept it? Well, it was, what's this big race they have? It's a big horse race. I should know, Melbourne Cup. So the Melbourne Cup, I think, was about to be run on the day all our containers arrived. And I went to the guys early in the morning and I said, "Will you clear some cars today?" And he said, "Well, we'll get through maybe 1 or 2. We've got the Melbourne Cup, and of course we all stop for that." And he said, "But, we've allowed a whole week for your cars." And we'd allowed 10 days there because we knew it could take time. He took the first car out. It was so clean. I mean, you don't want to know how anal I was about it.
I know you reasonably well, Paul. I can imagine it. Carry on.
We had those cars not only pressure washed, we painted underneath. The tires were washed and cleaned. We didn't even drive them from the cleaning place. We put them on low loaders to the containers. Every precaution, everything in the car was washed and cleaned and scrubbed. 2 days solid. Everyone cleaned their cars. We got every car through before the Melbourne Cup started. And the guy, he just one car after the next. He says, I've never seen cars this clean. And then mine came and he said, I'm definitely going to find stuff in your car. And he put a pressure washer through my chassis. And of course, I knew nothing was going to come up. And I said, oh, beers on this. Anyway, it was so nice. So now we had 10 days to go and explore Darwin. And that was fantastic. I mean, there's an old, what struck me, there was a great team of old classic car enthusiasts that had commandeered an old hangar. And these guys were guys who'd retired and they'd come there. And I think the wives would chuck them out the house and they could go and play in this aircraft hangar and just fettle and play with their cars. Well, they were a godsend to us because you had an auto electrician there and you had someone else there. And of course, I had all the help at my hands and they just got stuck into our cars and helped us fix things and sort things out. So, to pull off something like that, when it's one of you to look after 20 vehicles, it's a massive responsibility. And one doctor to look after 20 people. And we had our accidents. We didn't have any near fatalities, but we had people getting quite ill. On different rallies, I've had to evacuate people out, get them onto emergency aircraft. You come to accidents, people have died, you're pulling them out cars, cutting cars open. There's a lot of training I did beforehand to actually be competent enough, and especially if you're with doctors. Every rally I normally team up with a doctor, and so when Nikki and I parted, we continued doing rallies, and different doctors joined me in the rally, and generally you learn a lot. I mean, you had mechanical and medical. One's fixing the people, one's fixing the cars. It's kind of amusing at borders, especially in Africa, and you go, no, this one fixes the cars and this one fixes the people. But the reality was we really have explored and given people a gift of experiences they wouldn't normally get. I mean, how many people who can really afford to have anything they want, have these beautiful classic cars, are in a workshop sharing their lunch with the mechanics, loving it. And the best thing is some of these people are quite significant people in the world who are, leaders in what they do, and, a name drop, but the reality is they've come on rallies with us and they can just be normal.
Be themselves.
And just enjoy an experience. We're all driving a car along a road and we're all going to enjoy it. And when someone breaks down, you go back and you help, and, a car catches fire, you get there, you sort it out, you put it out, you fix it. And, someone on the side of the roads had an accident, not even us, you stop, you help.
But of course there was the rally where you actually were the patient. That's in South America, wasn't it?
So South America was another big rally. It was before I did London to Cape Town. Now South America was a rally to drive from Rio to Lima to Terra del Fuego and back up to Rio over a 3-month period. But 100 vehicles. I kid you not.
100?
100 cars. Yeah. So you had 50 4-wheel drives and 50 classic cars. Okay. And again, this was one of the events organized by the Historical Endurance Rally organization. Great organization, great guys. But we had massive challenges. I mean, before we even got there, we had problems with hotels. One country, the agent had run off with all the deposits for the hotels. So what we thought were hotels booked, we suddenly didn't have hotels. Can you imagine?
For 100, for what? Crazy. Yeah.
I don't want to tell you where people had to sleep and what we made a plan, but that was hotel logistics. That rally was probably the toughest I've ever done. It became very dangerous because the crew were very stretched. People got lost. We were going, sometimes you come in after a full day of driving at 8, 9 at night. Someone's not made it in. You have to get back in your car and go and drive again. I mean, a couple of nights I remember I just took someone who was fresh. I said, give me someone who's not tired to come and drive with me. And I'd go back out looking for people who were lost. So we were desperately pushed beyond our reserves. There were times when we didn't get much sleep at night, fixing cars and finding people and sorting issues out. And We had some major accidents on the rally, but my accident was probably one of the worst accidents that happened on the rally. And it was 4 days from the end of the rally, and Mark and I were pushing to keep up with the rally. And what had happened is we'd had a number of nights where we just had really late. One beautiful hotel, we spent an hour. We came in very late. We had an hour sleep. We had to get up to drive again. It was crazy. So our bodies were that exhausted. And this is why I'm so vehement about safety and the rules I've put in place from that experience. But long and short was, we were in Uruguay. The rally was ahead of us. We were the final sweep vehicle. And I was trying to make up time on one of the dirt roads, quite remote, and pushing and driving way too fast, especially for the state my body was in, way too tired. And I lost control of the vehicle. It was a double cab Mitsubishi, left-hand drive. And I had the car all over the road, and eventually I hit an embankment and I flipped the car, flipped it head over, and I rolled it 6 times. Now, with a car, when that happens, it doesn't have a roll cage in, so the A post where the windscreen is, that cut me from pretty much above my right eye, right to the back of my scalp. It broke my neck. C5 and 6 were shattered, and my spine was a 90-degree bend. Now, the car is lying on its side. That morning, the doctor, Mark, took our sat phone, which normally used to hang. We made a hook and hung it next to his right ear. We put it in the glove box. And if it wasn't for that, putting it in the glove box, the sat phone would probably have been destroyed. And we wouldn't have been able to call for help, and I wouldn't have survived. So the fact we put the sat phone in, Mark's airbag went off, mine didn't. He wasn't injured. He could get out the vehicle. He could have pulled me out of the window, knowing I had a neck injury. As an orthopedic surgeon, knowing exactly what to do. Your body's amazing. When it breaks something, every muscle in my neck went into a solid spasm. And he literally pulled me out of the car, still bleeding. And I think after 4 drips to try and stabilize me, managed to call for help. Now, there isn't just a helicopter available, but the other doctor in the rally, happened to be with a veterinary surgeon in a town a good while away. And that vet happened to know a very big connection in the military. And they brought a military helicopter in, picked me up. So this Huey flew in, picked me up, and Mark up, took me to a hospital in Montevideo, where they scanned me and all that. And that Sunday morning, by chance, a plastic surgeon came in to see one of his patients, and he was roped in to stitch me up. So my scarring is very minimal. So the plastic surgeon stitched me up, and 20 minutes away was probably one of the best, a hospital where the best neck surgeon in South America operated. And Mark, being a orthopedic surgeon, scrubbed in to watch them do the operation. Now, at that time, when they do an operation of what had happened to me, they would come in, take bone from your hip, which actually is more sore than anything. They put plates in your neck, and they'd either operate from the front or the back and do one or other. This surgeon did the one, I think it was the front first, flipped me over, and then did the back. He was making very sure. He was so gifted in what he did, and Mark was blown away, as an orthopedic surgeon, watching this man do this operation. And I remember him saying before he left to say that actually, you had an amazing operation. And then Nikki flew into South America, and, then it was a road to recovery. And of course, I was 1.5 years from my waist down numb. I had to learn to write again. I'd smashed my hand up, neck, but I had a very good physio. I had really good care, and I had a mental approach to my recovery where I threw all the painkillers away on the 2nd or 3rd day. Because once I got back to the UK, I checked myself out of the hospital, and I decided I'd go home and work with a physio who was specialized in necks. And that was something I never regret. I worked with the pain, and it allowed me to recover much quicker. And my mind was focused. I would never have a negative thought about it, ever. And I would get full recovery to everything I used to do. And I did. So yeah, that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about safety, preparation, where things go wrong and how they go wrong. And I've applied that in my trainings with clients, in how I approach my rallies and expeditions. But we've continued that because we've driven around the Mediterranean, we've driven top to bottom of South America, we've driven across America, we've driven across Australia, top to bottom of Australia. I've driven from Ireland to Russia. So, not all in rally cars, some of them are big expeditions. But on the classic car rally stuff, we then continued with another organization when Global Rally decided they were going to stop their organization. And I joined Destination Rally, a Belgian company. And Joe and I, my wife now, and her and I actually put together with Destination Rally a support. We part of their support crew and in running rallies with them. So yeah, every year I do at least one. Next year I'm doing 3, going through New Zealand. New Zealand's going to be amazing. Actually, I have never been to New Zealand, so I'm really looking forward to that. And we drive around New Zealand. And then after New Zealand, we're doing Africa. And Africa is really exciting for me because we've had such great response. I think we've got 25 vehicles booked for Africa. And that's a great number. And we'll be starting in Cape Town, up through Namibia, across the top of Botswana, into Zimbabwe, round through Marnapool, well, not into Marnapool, but onto Lake Kariba, down through into Mozambique, and making our way back down to Cape Town. So that is 5 weeks long, 5, almost 6 weeks. So it's going to be great because I can actually show people Africa.
How do I get invited?
A nice word to Bruno.
I'll make a nice couple of movies.
Yeah, I know. This exactly. Don't know it. That's true. No, I have spoken to him in the past. It's, I guess, yeah, something to talk about. But so we're doing that, and then we're doing India later in the year. And earlier this year we did Sri Lanka in January. Right. Sri Lanka was amazing. Oh, wow. What a beautiful, soulful country. In fact, on our Essence of Overlanding, we put a couple of films on that, on Sri Lanka. And every time we do a rally, we do a little film. But Sri Lanka, the people were just amazing, really, just lovely. So, I think the balance of being able to do classic car rallies, along with my own overland expeditions, with some of the serious professional expeditions we've done, along with Joe and I traveling to go and explore, why not? It's a great life. It's hard work, but I enjoy it.
The rallying appeals to me, and I think it's your opportunity. I finance my trips through the content I make. You finance your trips through the support you give to rallies. But the end result is we just get to meet amazing people and see amazing places, and it's fantastic. I'm seriously want to be on one of your rallies. I don't know what I would drive or how, where. I'm very, very interested. Maybe my Range Rover. I don't know.
I'm just thinking exactly your Range Rover. I mean, hey, why not?
It runs beautifully. It's been for sale for a while now, and it's still for sale, but I haven't sold it, and it runs really well. I mean, it's so.
Yeah, no, listen, there'd be nothing. It's always interesting at the start of any rally. Now, when we do these rallies, I don't get to scrutineer the cars anymore because logistically it's not so easy. So I've got a whole set of notes I've written up, and it really is the responsibility of the owners and the mechanics to prepare their cars. And to be said, most people do a great job and they prepare their cars really well. But some people don't have that experience, or the workshops don't have the experience. And then, then my work's cut out for me because you get a car on the rally and you go, whoa, this is going to be hard work. And sometimes you get a car and you'll look at the cars, the lineup, and you'll think, I wonder which one's going to give me the most trouble.
Yeah.
And often it's the unexpected one that's going to give you all the trouble, It's we had 2 motorbikes on the last rally, and it was a great couple. They were just lovely Dutch couple. And they wanted to drive their motorbikes, their BMWs, and they'd had them completely restored. But the lady's motorbike, the cylinder head had a problem. The one valve dropped and there was a problem. Didn't break a piston in that, but it had a problem. It couldn't run. So I phoned the guys back in Holland, and I said to him, I need a cylinder head. He said, there isn't one. I said, no, there is. You've got one in your workshop. Just strip it off. And he was horrified. I said, no, you're going to strip it off that bike there in your workshop. You're going to send it to me. And I think we had 2 flights. I want to tell you what it cost to get me the cylinder head. But 2 days later, I bolted a cylinder head onto her bike and she carried on riding. And we had another one. We had an old Ferrari that was completely rebuilt, real Ferrari. And I think we're driving across America at the time. And the water pump gave in. And the lady and her husband got the car to a hotel and pulled the water pump out. And I phoned the guys back to, I think it was in England, they'd rebuilt this car. And he said, there isn't another water pump in the world. I said, no, there has to be. I can't, I said, have you got an engine in your workshop? He said, yeah, but I can't take it off. I said, no, you are going to take it off. You've just rebuilt this car for these clients and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So he did, and, which was really nice. But I've had people, when we're traveling, who in classic car clubs get to hear about us going through, and we have problems, we need parts. They will go and bolt the part off their car and give it to us to keep us going. And then down the line, we send them back the part. I mean, that's the camaraderie and the support. Yeah. Someone takes his car, sitting in a thing, says, "Yeah, I'm going to take the part of my car, use it." So it's just, I love it. I mean, what I really enjoy is when I put my car together. So we're now building. I've got a left-hand drive Land Cruiser, which was on a number of our rallies. Beautiful old '97 car I bought for a very dear friend of mine who's passed on, and he gave it to us. And this truck's got 111,000 kilometers on petrol, 4.5.
It's not even run in.
Drive. It's not even run in. It's beautiful. So this is the car we're using on our Africa rally.
Okay.
And I'm having so much fun now putting everything together for the trip, And, it's like anything. You can always make a plan. I mean, I remember being in Egypt when we were coming down through Africa. We had a Dutch couple, and the father was in his 70s and the daughter was, I think, 25 or so. It was a lovely combination. Often you get a father-daughter or father-son or father, and the families come together, but the father-daughter combination is lovely on the rallies. Anyway, this old Land Rover 90 had really not been prepared properly. And we're in Hurghada. I come across this Land Rover. It's late at night. I stop, the front wheel sitting at an angle. So clearly something's wrong there. I take the wheel off to see that the hub and disc are held on by the caliper, and the whole bearing is collapsed. It's not going to work. I then need to get a tow truck. The Egyptians don't speak English, so we're on the sat phone to a hotel to get someone to speak English to tell the policeman I need a tow truck. Eventually this truck arrives, but it's a flatbed truck. Now we're talking 10, 11 at night. This flatbed truck arrives. And I look at this policeman and I go, and how the hell are we supposed to get this Land Rover on this truck? And he can see by what I'm saying that I'm frustrated in that. But he didn't tell me. The biggest front end loader came around the corner with a bucket, probably the size of the Land Rover, raised it above the Land Rover. We put two Hessian ropes, left and right hand side. Yeah. We lifted the thing up, and I'm just praying it doesn't fall. Put it on the back of a truck with an axle stand, strapped it down, put a policeman in there, another one, sent it off 2 days ahead of where we were going to be, and we continued to the hotel. And I woke him up and I said, "Look, your car's it's on a truck. If you're lucky, we'll see it at the next hotel we get to. If you're unlucky, it's been pulled apart for pieces. But let's hope you're lucky." So I get to the next hotel, and they've done the same thing. They've taken it off the truck. They make a plan. It's great. It's what I love about Africa as well. And, traveling through the Middle East as well, the guys were very innovative. But there's this Land Rover with one axle stand, the wheel thrown on the roof, and a whole sorry-looking mess around the axle there. So I strip out the drive shaft, the stub axle's all worn away, bearings are destroyed. I find a guy in a container who's got a weld and a lathe. And I sit with the stub axle and I weld the stub axle. I take the CV joint, I pull the shaft out, I push the CV joint into the stub axle, and I weld it to the stub axle to give it some strength because it's so worn away. And I build the stub axle up. We put it in the lathe, we machine that down. We make a Teflon plug, we plug the hole in the axle so that's now blocked up, the oil can't come in. I put a new set of bearings on and the brakes and all that. And I said to him, "Well, you kind of got 3.5 wheel drive. You haven't got 4-wheel drive, but 3.5 wheels, but you're not going to be able to use 4-wheel drive, but it'll drive. And then we put it on the Antonov and got into Uganda, where I managed to source parts. But it was phenomenal. This guy was amazing. And we spent an afternoon, I think it was 7 or 8 hours, building up and fixing this whole thing. And we had to make nuts because they were buggered and we didn't have spares. And it was just a great way to guys who are so capable with a machine, and they'll make it for you. And why not? Just need some time and good craftsmanship.
Fantastic.
So it's that which really has given me a lot of fun, a lot of stress at times. You can't go on these trips and worry about what's going to happen. Otherwise, you'll never do them. It's like the doctor can't worry about who's going to be a patient. You've got to go on these trips and say, if it happens, it happens, and we deal with it.
It reminds me of my crossing with the Range Rover, buying it in Melbourne, doing a bit of work on it, and driving it right across, unsupported, across Australia. And I put a fridge in the back. I bought a rudimentary sleeping bag. I got some food, put it in the fridge, and I thought, well, what's the worst can happen? I sleep on the back seat. That's the worst that can happen. And as it was, I was driving quite slowly. I was being careful with the vehicle. I was nursing it. I was not doing more than about 90 k's an hour because I wanted to keep it going and make sure that, and I was checking it frequently. And because it was right in the middle of COVID, there was no accommodation anywhere. And so I hit nightfall. And that's when I phoned you. I'd pulled off the road. I'd driven half a kilometre through the bush, opened the back of the tailgate, made myself something to eat, and then phoned you and said, I'm halfway across Australia. I've been driving for 4 days and have found myself in a situation that I have prepared for. While the Range Rover is running well, organising accommodation for tonight has been impossible. I didn't want to do this at night. So you can see a few trees over there. I have no choice but to set up camp somewhere in the bush. I have no tent, very little camping equipment, but sufficient to keep me dry and fed. Welcome to the last chapter in the purchase, collection, preparation and drive across Australia of my 45-year-old Range Rover. Reasonably level. I'll make myself something to eat. I don't have a chair, table or anything like that. I'm going to point the car. There you go. Paul.
Andrew, how are you, man? I was just saying to myself, I wonder if he's home yet. Has he made it?
Okay, now I'm just letting you are on camera at the moment. I've got the phone on speaker. I am about 60 kilometres from a town called Cocklebiddy on the Ayr Freeway. Don't know the proper pronunciation, but basically just come out of the Nullarbor. I've pulled over at the side of the road because I cannot get accommodation anywhere because there are so many travellers on the road, so I'm going to sleep on the back seat tonight.
It's amazing how many people independently are travelling. I mean, I see so many in Africa now who've come out to travel. Some can, some can't, and people are just getting in their vehicles and going.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had more calls for troopies this week than you'd want to know. I think it's incredible.
Wow.
So you're sleeping on the back seat. We didn't actually plan to give you to put in a sort of tent and stuff. I really didn't think you'd have a problem.
So I put this kit in because I was concerned that I might have a breakdown and have to be forced to sleep in the car because of one thing or another. And it's paid off, and the car's running beautifully. I've had
no problems. No overheating, nothing.
No, cool as a cucumber. I've got a little bit of a leak from my front right hub oil seal. It's getting onto the brakes, but only a little bit. Apart from that, she's running absolutely smoothly. It couldn't be better. So I'm very, very pleased.
Your mileage? How much mileage have you driven so far?
So at the moment, I've done approximately 2,600 so far.
Gee, that's amazing. Well done. Well, that's you know what, I just love the fact that it's really looking after you. This is such a lovely experience for you because you've owned one of these before. You know what it's like.
Yeah.
What's the feeling like driving it?
You know, the funny thing is that it's like a reality check. I remember so clearly when I getting in my Range Rover, after you've driven it for about an hour, the motor suddenly quietens down and it speeds up and it's just smooth and fantastic. And it's happened exactly, you know, what happened with my old one has happened with this one. It feels the same. The seats are extremely comfortable. They're far more comfortable than my standard troopy seats. They're really good seats. It's a bit slow. I'm sitting between 90 and 100 k's an hour because the engine and gearbox is pretty loud, particularly the engine actually. The exhaust pipe is not doing its job like it should, so it's quite noisy. Consumption, I'm getting consumption of 15 litres, between 14 and 15 and a half litres per 100 k's, which is not terrible for a Rover V8.
You know what, you're still running the engine in. Don't forget that.
That is true. That is true.
I mean, you haven't even, I don't think that engine did 1,000 k's before you took it.
Oh, it did less than 100.
This is brilliant.
It did less than 100. But I had just had those contingencies. I thought, if the worst happens, well, I've got water, I've got food, I've got some shelter, you know. And it was actually quite fun, even though when it did happen, I have to sleep curled up in the back seat of the Range Rover. It was fun. It was just fun, you know.
It's great, you know, when these things happen, you know, you break down in the middle of nowhere and you've got to do something and sort it out. It's part of the experience. I mean, so many of our clients have come back and basically had an experience where something went wrong. You know, on my first trip through Africa, my very first one, when I took an old Hilux that I rebuilt, I mean, I cracked the chassis in half. I broke springs. I mean, you just didn't have anything like you've got now. This is more than 30 years ago, going up through Africa. There weren't sat phones and GPSs and all that. You couldn't get any information. You used a Michelin map and, you know, your compass, and you kind of spoke to people. And when things went wrong, people would help you and people would tow you, and you'd pull parts of full cars and fix it. And you couldn't get the beautiful suspensions we have, or I couldn't afford it at the time. But like you say, it's what's the worst? The worst is that, you know, are you prepared enough to rough it for a night or two? And that's what I believe is important. It's about taking responsibility to go and travel fearlessly free to be you if you want, and really explore, knowing that you've got some contingencies. You maybe have a sat phone, you've got some food. You're not going to die as long as you're careful and safe. And if something goes wrong with the car, you will get help. It just may take some time. That's okay. Part of the fun. And then you get help in a way you didn't expect. Make some new friends and come back and go, my life's richer for the whole experience.
Yeah.
So I've been very blessed in my life with all I've done. And I give gratitude to all the people who've given me those huge experiences and opportunities. And as long as I can do it, I continue. It's great fun.
Fantastic. It's a wonderful thing you've done with these rallies. Paul, I thank you for your time today. It's been really fun. Thank you for your insights and your wonderful stories.
Thanks, Andrew, and I appreciate being able to share them. It's passion and beautiful stories and lovely people. And thank you for the opportunity. Look after yourself.
You too. Soon. Everybody, thank you very much for listening. Keep an eye out on the YouTube channel. Within 2 or 3 weeks of this going live, there will be more broadcasts from Paul in South Africa as he carefully builds my Land Cruiser. See you next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Next Adventure podcast with me, Andrew St Pierre White. To find out more information, check out TheNextJourney.net. Join us each Sunday.